Welcome back. Arroz con gandules. You heard me. Arroz con gandules, which means rice with pigeon peas, Puerto Rican style. And the technique I'm going to apply is based on what I learned watching my grandmother, who by the way was born in 1914, and watching my aunt. And I apply, because I'm cooking with the senses, I apply some of the natural flavors that you cannot find in cans. So go nowhere, let's create. Just because they look the same, they are not the same. Arroz con gandules, you use green pigeon peas, which is called Gandules verdes. These are sweet peas, which is guisante dulces in Spanish. If you use sweet peas to do arroz con gandules, Puerto Rican style, you're going to mess it up big time. Good, bueno. Not good, not for this dish. Muy malo. So here are the ingredients. I'm going to use 2 cups of medium-sized white rice, 1 cup of pigeon peas or gandules. I'm going to have 2 tomatoes, which I'm going to grate and make my tomato sauce. Olive, optional. I have my sofrito, homemade. You're going to find a link in my description on how to make that sofrito. And I also have a substitute. If you don't want to make sofrito, then I'm going to tell you what ingredients you can use to substitute, like cilantro, onions, garlic, etc. I have some salted pork or ham or salted pork. This is actually very optional, but my grandmother and my aunt used to use it. I rarely do, but I'm going to use it for this one, but you don't have to. And you just use about 3 or 4 pieces. Smoked paprika, about a tablespoon. I'm going to use some cumin, and actually my sofrito already have cumin in it when I prepare, but I decided to add a little bit more, just a tiny bit more. Extra virgin olive oil, salt, I'm using sea salt, and water. Now the way I'm going to manage the water here, because I have 1 cup of the pigeon peas, I'm going to use 1 cup of water. In addition to that cup of water, because I have 2 cups of rice, I'm going to use perhaps about 2 1/4, but I added 2 1/2, 2 cups and a half, because of the other solids. The idea here is to make sure you have about 1/4 to perhaps a little bit more, 1/4 to 3 to half a cup extra in water, above the solids. And I'm going to show you that as I start the next step of the process. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of extra virgin olive oil in a very hot pot. This pot has been heating up for about 60 seconds now. And you add your salted pork, which is optional. You don't have to use this. Now, one of the reasons when I prepare my sofrito, some people put salt on it in the sofrito when they're making that sofrito, weeks or months in advance. I don't, because of this reason. Sometimes you have to come with stuff that already has a high content of salt. And by having this sofrito without salt, you're managing your salt content. It's not about being salty, although that's bad too. It's about having the content of salt, the sodium. That's not good for you. So you heat it up a little bit like that. Doesn't have to be fully cooked. Now some people take them out. I don't. I'm going to continue working in the same place. And I'm going to go on with the sofrito. Please check my description. I'm going to have a link on how to prepare sofrito. Let me put a little bit more oil. Ooh, this stuff smells good. You move it around a little bit. Now the two tomatoes that you saw earlier, I grated them. I'm going to add them. I like my tomato sauce to be natural. Going back to the sofrito storyline, some people add tomatoes to their sofrito. I strongly recommend them not to do that for exactly the same reason. Here I'm adding already tomato sauce, and if you have tomatoes in your sofrito, you're increasing the acidic content of your food. That's not good, especially if you don't want to suffer heartburn or if you have ulcers or things like that. Those kind of things can be prevented. This stuff is looking pretty good, the sauce. Let me use some paprika. I'm not using the smoked type. I like that flavor. And let me put some olive. Some people don't like olive. You don't have to use them either. And you're creating this base. This stuff smells fantastic. Now, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to add the pigeon peas or the gandules. And the reason I'm doing that now is because I want them mixed with the base. Now, what some people do is they like to add the rice now. And it's nothing wrong with that by adding the rice before the water. But I don't do that. I personally like to add the rice after the water. And there's a reason for that. But before I get into the reason and before I forget becoming, I'm going to adjust a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. There it is. Just a little bit. Ooh, the flavor, that smell. So the reason I don't do that and I add the water first is by adding the water first and let it boil for a little bit. What you're doing is you're creating a broth. And by you creating the broth, you're already having that flavor ready for the rice. See, I'm going to let it boil. And when it starts boiling is when I'm going to add the rice. So I'm creating a broth. Now, if you put the rice first and you mix it up, which is fine, and later you add the water, now you're adding water to rice. But by having the water first, you're adding rice to a broth. It's a huge difference when it comes to working and cooking with the senses. So you do this, move it a little bit. And something you want to do now, as it does that, you want to taste it. And that lets you know if you need to add more salt, which I knew I do. And you add your salt to taste. I'm using sea salt. And I might have to get a new one because this one is about gone. So I use some sea salt and add it to it. And And I make sure that, add enough. And then you mix it up. Because you want to make sure the salt is mixed properly. And then what you do is you taste it again. There it is. Add a little bit more. And once again, this is to your flavor. When you, when you taste the broth with the amount of salt you already put, that gives you an idea how it's going to taste your rice. Now we're talking about. So I want this stuff to start heating up a little bit before I add the rice. And you see how it's starting to look like foamy? That means that's about to reach boiling point. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add the rice now, before I reach that point, because I wanted to reach that point when the rice is there. And please mix it up very good. And want everything mixed in the rice. The sauce, the little pieces of meat that added, the olive, and certainly the gandules, pigeon peas. So what you do now is you grab a little stick or something and you're trying to touch the tip of the rice. And this one is about, perhaps, I would say about 1/2 inch. Yeah, if that. See, it went out the way here. A little bit over 1/4 inch, which is exactly what I wanted. Some people put too much water, and what it does is the rice turn out, very burnt on the bottom, which is not a good thing. And the thing is about this kind of rice is you're going to have some of that rice burnt at the bottom anyhow, because you already did the saute with the tomato sauce and with the sofrito, so that automatically is going to create some level of burning. But you can minimize that. I'm just moving it to make sure it's well distributed. And when it starts boiling, like it's doing now, let it boil for a few more seconds. And then what you do is you look for a cover, which is what I'm doing now. I had to stretch a little bit to reach for that cover. Hopefully I grabbed the right one. And now it's doing some boiling, which I like it. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to move the heat from high to about medium. I'm going to cover it. And I'm going to wait. I'm going to come and watch, come and check it out about 7-8 minutes. This is not a time thing. This is more of an observation process. You want the water to be somewhat drained. And I'm going to show you in the next process. But it's going to take a few minutes for that. It's going to take about maybe 7-8 minutes, maybe longer, who knows. But I'm going to check in 7 minutes. And then you come back later. It's been 8 minutes. It's not nearly ready yet. But I'm going to do something a little bit unorthodox. I don't want my stuff burned. So you notice I'm not moving things around. I just doing this at the bottom so it doesn't get too burned. Because it's going to get somewhat burned. But it's not near ready yet. I just getting a feeling at the bottom. People call it pegao. In essence, pegao is burnt rice. let's not kid ourselves here. There's not much you can do when it's this kind of rice. White rice, you can actually cook it without burning it. This one, you're going to burn a little bit. But I'm minimizing things. I think it still have about another, perhaps another 5-6 minutes. So I'm going to cover it up again. I'm going to lower the heat a tiny bit more. Let's call it medium low. It's not low, it's not high, it's not medium, but it's kind of medium low. I'm going to do this for another 5-6 minutes. So look how it looks once the water is somewhat drained. This is almost done, but I want to move it around for a little bit, you know, mixing it up. So I want to cook, and it's not entirely ready yet, but it's almost there. So what I'm doing is moving things around a little bit. Now earlier, when you saw me using the spoon and doing this, so it didn't stick too much at the bottom, it's still going to stick at the bottom. But one thing you notice is that I wasn't moving things around like this, you know, when it was still kind of a bit of water. Because if I would have done that earlier, what would have happened is the rice would have turned out to be sticky. What we call in Puerto Rico amogallao, like balls of, you know, everything sticking, too sticky. So I didn't want to do that. So I just did a little bit of the, you know, I was doing like this to make sure it wasn't, you know, sticking too much on the bottom. But it's going to stick, as you can see. It's nothing you can do with this kind of rice because of the tomato sauce and the sofrito process. Plus this is a cast iron too. And by the way, you can use other type of pots. It doesn't have to be cast iron. I just like to cook this rice with cast iron. And it's almost there. So yeah, it's almost there. Let me give it a taste. Yeah, it's almost there. So this is what I'm going to do now. A lot of people don't do this part. My aunt in Puerto Rico, she's about 80 years old now. But growing up, I remember she used to step out the house, go to the banana tree, and get some banana tree leaf or plantain leaf. Which this one's a plantain leaf, but the banana is very similar. Here in Virginia, we don't have that. So I had to buy it in the regular supermarket store. I go to the Latino section. It's refrigerated because, you know, they had to preserve it. And this one is, the brand is Goya. I suspect there are other brands. So I buy a bag. Here they are. I wash them, you know, like I do my rice. And because this is almost done, what I'm doing here is I'm going to cover them. I'm going to turn the heat. Actually, I can put it low, but I'm going to turn it off because it's still hot. And I'm going to put this leaf for about 1 to maybe 2 minutes. What I'm doing with this is the steam that's coming. And you know what? I'm going to cover it to make sure all the steam is there. The steam is staying within the rice during those last 2 minutes of the process. And the flavor from the plantain leaf is going to add the smell and that kind of imaginary flavor, because it's really not adding flavor, but it's an initial temporary flavor, but the smell is there. And this is a nice touch, and I learned that from my aunt, who I love very much. She's still alive in Puerto Rico. And you know, I love you, Aunt Betty. Thank you for teaching me some things. Yeah, arroz con gandules.